Offices closed early, so the streets are quiet. In places like Seward, Kodiak, and Valdez, fishing vessels are tying up for the weekend. At the dock in Valdez, the 10,000-ton freighter SS Chena is unloading much-needed supplies. 2 crewmen aboard use their new 8mm camera to film excited people on the dock below. At an office in Anchorage, 2 attorneys, a pathologist, and a court reporter prepare for a case. The time is 5:36.
Some respiration had been instituted, and for all practical purposes, the patient was alive again. That's clear. This is about the
On the Chena, it's 20 minutes before quitting time when the crew feels a sudden lurch.
He was just coming to run up the gangway, and he said, "Stay aboard." He said, "It's an earthquake." So about that time, we started up in the air when the old dock started to go like a cement mixer.
A huge subterranean chasm opens up alongside the Chena. The harbor empties and the dock is swallowed up. Moments later, a huge wave comes crashing in to fill the void.
I remember going out into the street and looking down this way, and I heard the Chena whistle blow as if they were leaving, and I knew that they hadn't been there long enough to unload, because they always stayed 3 to 6 hours, and they'd just gotten there. And I thought, boy, that's riding awful high in the water, because I could look down and I could see it up, but it didn't dawn on me what was happening.
The camera still rolls as the Chena is raised 30 feet on the wave, then crashes into the heart of town.
Everything was flopping. The telephone lines were busting, and electric live wires were all around us. It was like we're surrounded. And I remember saying that we're trapped, because there was no place to go.
Jerry Beleza, a longshoreman at the Valdez dock.
Everywhere I looked was someplace I didn't want to be. I looked down at the waterfront, there was water coming up. I looked up the street, there was water coming down, but the surface water was real shallow over there. And the telephone poles about 3 feet underneath the crossarm snapped, one right after another right down the street. Sounded like a cannon shot. Well, there's power lines coming down, and I decided I better start moving.
Bernard Whalen watches as a man on the splintering dock tries to get away.
And he was on the dock at the time, and when the earthquake came, I saw him pick his two little kids up, and he never made it.
During the night, there was a lot of stories as to who's here and who's not, and everybody's counting heads. And I remember the basketball coach's wife coming in. She was pretty broken up because her husband and 2 kids went down on the dock, and it was tough. You can see the shock on people's faces still. They're stunned, and grips me.
All 28 people on the dock are swept away, and none will survive.
It was kind of a tough pill to swallow, the life we lost. Especially I had town broken when I was longshoreman with all these guys. It was just kind of one big happy family. And it really changed our lives completely. Chena hadn't been in here. There had possibly been maybe 3 or 4 loss of life on a small boat. But it was very unfortunate at the time.
Incredibly, the Chena rides out the wave without even springing a leak, but 60 other boats are smashed, and 80% of Valdez is destroyed. All told, 31 residents are killed. 100 miles southwest of Valdez in Prince William Sound, the small fishing village of Cheniga. It is built on pilings at the water's edge and is right in the path of the Good Friday tsunami, a 70-foot wave of death and destruction.
I see a wave form right outside Losing Islands there. And all I had to do was start running for higher ground. First one wasn't that big. Nothing to see now. The last one took everything that was standing after the first one. Just hanging on to the corner of that building, my fingertips, arms stretched out like this, and reaching for my wife or whatever, like this. It was on the other side, hanging out to the corner across there, and just grabbing her by the fingertips and the sides.
The waves splash against the school 90 feet above sea level. Most of the victims are caught in their homes or along the beach. The first wave sweeps up a father carrying 2 small daughters while a 9-year-old runs beside them. 26 of Chiniga's 72 residents are killed. The survivors are evacuated to nearby Cordova. When they return the next day, only the schoolhouse remains standing. The village is gone. In Seward, the terror of Good Friday hits in 3 stages.
Again, we repeat, the entire port facility has just been wiped out. There simply isn't a port there anymore.
The major oil port and terminus of the Alaska Railroad, population 1,700, is walloped by the quake. 30 seconds after the shaking begins, a huge underwater slide jolts Seward's waterfront. 3/4 of a mile long, the dock, a warehouse, and 8 huge fuel storage tanks slide into Resurrection Bay.
We received this report through the city manager here in Anchorage that both the oil tanks and docks are on fire at Seward.
Pipes leading to the tanks burst and ignite, and then comes the huge wave carrying the burning oil slick, a huge tide of fire that burns what's left of the waterfront. The fire and wave wipe out most of Seward. Every dock gone, the rail yards destroyed, the power plant and 26 huge tanks of fuel up in flames. 12 people die. In the state's largest city, the quake hits hard. Wave after wave rolls through. At the new JCPenney store downtown, less than a year old, 5-inch thick cement slabs begin to break off and fall to the street below. A man on the sidewalk is crushed to death. A woman driving by is struck and killed in her car. Another woman is trapped inside her crushed car, but she will be rescued. On 4th Avenue, the city's main business thoroughfare, a 1/4-mile section caves in. On one side of the street only, buildings drop 10 feet or more below the sidewalk. Many shops and cars are destroyed. The other side of the street remains intact. Several schools are badly damaged, but the timing of the quake perhaps saves dozens of young lives. At Anchorage International Airport, the 68-foot control tower topples, killing an air traffic controller. The Four Seasons apartment complex collapses. It is still under construction, so no one is living there. The workers just quit for the night. In the upscale neighborhood called Turnagain Heights, devastation. A 1.5 mile long area of the bluff overlooking Knik Arm slides toward the sea. 70 homes go with it. Tay Thomas, wife of journalist Lowell Thomas Jr., was in her home on Chilligan Drive in Turnagain when it hit.
Lowell had gone to Fairbanks by plane, in his plane, and the children and I were home alone. Ann was 8 and Dave was 6. And they were in bare feet, as was I. And we were lying on beds watching television, and I thought I heard the sounds of gunfire. And it actually was earthquake sound, and somehow or other I knew it was an earthquake sound, although I had not ever heard it before. I just told the kids right away, let's go outside, I think we're having an earthquake. And we got down into the hall of the split-level home by the time the house started to really shake. And no sooner had we gotten out in the snow when there was such violent shaking that we were just flung to the ground. There was absolutely no way I could stand. And as we lay in the snow, I turned around and I watched the house crack open right where we had come through, right at the doorway. And then the back roof fell in, and then the front roof fell in, and then the front wall, and I could look right into the kitchen, and then the chimney disintegrated. And all of a sudden, this was in the midst of all the shaking, all of a sudden a black streak of black went right across the snow between my daughter and me. And I think that was the one moment in the whole time there that I felt any panic. There we were on a little piece of dirt covered with snow, and we were hanging on. My son couldn't really hang on, so I was hanging on to him, and my daughter was holding on, and here we were on this little slab in the middle of this big landslide. It was just sort of a maelstrom of dirt and rock and pieces of ground, and we were moving, and it felt like you were on a Ferris wheel, only going backward, and we were moving down into the inlet. Our greenhouse floated by us on a piece of dirt, and then the children's swing floated by us. And I looked around me and I thought, well, this is the end of the world. I had had enough reading in the Bible at that time to know that God would be with me at the end of the world. And I looked up in the sky to look for him. And at that very moment of looking for him, I experienced this most tremendous sense of peace inside of me. Just tremendous, right in the middle of this landslide. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped. And it was dead silence. And I'd say that cliff was about 75 feet above me. It was fresh sand and it was sloughing off. And I looked around me, and we were very close to the water at that point. And there was a lot of live wires, electric wires, and they were sort of moving, jumping around, and obviously live, you know, and I made a mental note to stay clear of them. But the ground all around me was so jumbled, I really wondered how I was going to walk out with the kids. We clambered up and down the snow, still barefoot, and I noticed some of our neighbors' homes, all in a wreck, all of them, completely pieces. We managed to get around to just about here, actually, when I saw there was a little place where I thought we could climb up, and at that point, some men appeared at the top of the cliff and came down toward us and helped carry the kids up. And I got to the top, and I looked back, and all I could feel was this tremendous sense of relief. Even though we'd lost all of our land and all of our house, I just felt so much relief at being alive and having the 2 children alive.
2 neighbor children are not so lucky. Next door to Thomas, 12-year-old Perry Mead is babysitting 2 younger brothers and a sister. When the quake hits, Perry gets them all outside, but during their escape, he and his 2-year-old brother Merrill plunge into a crevasse. Their bodies are never recovered. In Anchorage, a total of 9 people die in the quake. 200 miles to the southwest, Kodiak's 2,600 residents feel the quake too.
One thing that I remember was this big tree was alongside of me, and it was just heeling over. It was swishing, making this swish, swish. And everywhere I looked at, on Near Island, Woody Island, the whole earth was just rocking and reeling.
When I was in my mom's house, and I had to literally crawl up the stairs to get up because you couldn't stand up. It was shaking so hard. And we ran over to the window and looked out. Finally, when you got up, able to walk, and my dad's car was bouncing down the road. It was shaking so hard.
Seemed like it was never going to quit. It just sounded like a big freight train rushing through. The trees are swaying back and forth, and a vehicle parked across the street from us. Well, it was moving back and forth about 8-9 feet each time it got shook.
But Kodiak is built on solid rock, so there is little damage from the quake itself. The real threat is coming, a huge tsunami generated by the tremor.
They were putting notices out over the radio and everything else that there was a wave coming, and running around with police cars and sirens were blowing and trying to move everybody out of the downtown area.
Said to go up Pillar Mountain. Well, you couldn't even get close to it because the mountain, the people had already gone up there. They were walking up there, they were driving up there, and you know, this was in the evening, so it was starting to get dark.
At first, the water empties out of the harbor, stranding 160 fishing boats in the mud. Then at 6:47, more than an hour after the quake hits, a huge wave, cresting at 17 feet above normal water level, surges through the harbor.
I saw the water go out of the channel, but I didn't remember it at the time. I remembered it later. I saw it was like kelp or a rust deposit, and I don't remember it coming back in. I was just too frightened.
You could hear it coming into town. I mean, you could hear these waves coming in. And it wasn't really a wave so much as it was a high, fast rising tide. You could hear telephone poles snapping and houses crunching, and it was, and of course it was pitch black. You couldn't really see much, but you could just hear the awesome force going on.
The wave picks up boats, dock pilings, even houses, and washes them 3 blocks into town. 2 canneries are carried out to sea. 1 boat comes to rest in a schoolyard. 77 fishing vessels, almost half the fleet, are sunk or badly damaged. Several fishermen drowned.
There was a crew member on my father's boat. He jumped off the boat, jumped onto the breakwater, and was going to run it and get to high ground. But by that time a wave hit, and it swept him away.
Above the wreckage on Pillar Mountain, most of the town waits it out.
People had radios, the people that did have a radio, and we were listening to it, and the first thing we heard is that Kodiak Island had sunk. So it was kind of scary. You know, we didn't know what was happening to people. And we couldn't find out what happened to people because there was no communication. Everything was cut off.
My mother and my sister were in California, and that first night, it was the second night, I believe, that I heard on the radio that we were wiped off the face of the earth, you know, that we were totally gone. And there was no word to them. There was no way to get word out of here that we were okay. So they spent that whole night staying awake all night waiting for news.
My brother was a policeman in Hartford, Connecticut. He couldn't get, even with the police communications, he couldn't get past Seattle about what was happening to us. I guess he thought we sunk. Everybody thought we were gone.
Overnight, 5 more waves, 55 minutes apart, roll in. When the nightmare is over, the Kodiak harbor is in ruins. 8 people have died. The enormous tsunami races out to sea, and around midnight, more than 6 hours after the quake, the wave hits the beaches thousands of miles away in Crescent City, California.
We were accustomed to water. So when someone says that Alaska's had an earthquake and there's a possibility that we're going to have a tidal wave, we didn't give it a lot of thought. People went down to the beach to see the tidal wave. And they would probably do it again today, people that hadn't seen that one, because it was something to be afraid of. But we were accustomed to it, so it took us by surprise.
Many people who go to higher ground as the first wave hits return to the beach.
Then the next wave came in, and as it did, the lights, wires started breaking, We could see shots of flames going off. We lost phone contact as we tried to call his mother, and it just kept coming and coming. I just saw this water swirling in, and it just kept getting higher and higher. It was just, you could just see it creep up, and it was like you thought, is it going to stop?
As buildings washed away, power lines parted, and of course there was lots of displays of electricity. Lots of water, obviously. Different things floating by, other buildings floating by, cars with people in them, cars with people on roofs floating by.
A woman watches the disaster from a lighthouse and later writes this.
The basin was dry. At Citizens Dock, a barge loaded with millions of board feet of lumber was sucked down into the bay. The fishing boats still in the harbor were pulled into the floor of the ocean. We clung to one another, asking God to have mercy on us. We prayed for the people of the town. We fully realized the water would return with more destruction to follow. Suddenly, there was a mammoth wall of water barreling towards us, a terrifying mass of destruction stretching from the floor of the ocean upward. My husband shouted, "Let's head for the tower of the lighthouse." It was too late. As we raced towards the tower, he yelled, "Look out!" We both ducked. Splits swirled around both sides of the island with such speed it felt like we were sailing right along with it.
11 people in Crescent City drowned, most of them curious onlookers who returned to the beach after the first wave hit. It was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North America, magnitude 9.2, the second largest in the world, behind a 9.5 in Chile in 1960. In the first day after the Good Friday quake, there were 11 aftershocks, magnitude 6.0 or greater, 9 more in the next 3 weeks. Smaller aftershocks continued for more than a year. Damage in 1964 dollars was estimated at $400 million. 130 people died. 115 in Alaska, 11 in California, 4 in Oregon. 122 of the 130 deaths were caused by waves, either the local waves caused by underwater landslides or the open ocean tsunamis that resulted. The death and damage tolls, however tragic, were remarkably light. The devastation of nature was tempered by fortunate timing. Late in the day on a holiday, most businesses were closed, schools were empty. For those who were here, it was a day never to be forgotten, even if they wanted to. The day that changed them, they say. The day that changed Alaska. The day the earth shook.